Anyways, I guess we can call this part 2. As you can see here, I actually stayed up until about 2 last night. Got the Weber on. Actually used one of the provided spacers that comes with the carburetor, at least in the kit I got. Kind of hard to see in this picture, but right there is the spacer I used. Here's the adapter on the bottom, spacer I used, and the carb, of course, mounted on top. Weber also provided me with the gaskets to mount this. The reason why I put the spacer in is that I needed an additional vacuum port. I'm going to stick the phone down here really quick, see if you can see it. Somewhere in there. Anyways, reason I put that spacer in is it had, Weber calls it the brake booster port. I actually used it to provide a vacuum line, this large line to go to the PCV valve on top of the valve cover. I discovered if you disconnect the vacuum source from that PCV valve, you get a lot of oil blowout from either the PCV grommet or from the oil fill cap. So since I provided a negative pressure on the valve cover, it doesn't leak at all anymore. Anyways, like I was mentioning, right here is the throttle linkage that actually came in the CJ kit, actually mounted right to the base of the carburetor. It goes right across the front, and I pointed this bracket out yesterday. This is the factory YJ throttle cable. The only thing I had to do is this black metal bar right here. I actually fabricated that today because without that, every time I applied the throttle, this piece right here was flexing back and forth, so I wasn't able to get a full travel on the gas pedal without this bracket. So I just made that out of some scrap I had here around the house. It took me about 15 minutes, drilled a couple of holes. Actually mounted it, actually bolts right here on the intake manifold. Originally, this was one of the mounting points for the vacuum lines to go to the front differential. I went ahead and, of course, got rid of those vacuum lines since I don't need them anymore with this setup. I also got rid of the front differential vacuum actuator system and went to an Alloy USA diff lock. So I had no reason for those vacuum lines anymore. So pretty much it all bolted on, just kind of like I showed in part 1. Down there's the adapter plate I made. There's the Weber adapter. That middle plate I was saying or talking about a little earlier, and of course bolted the carburetor right in. Manual choke, I just ran the cable from the flight compartment or the driver's compartment and just routed it right up here, no problem. Did have to get an accelerator spring. Nice part is when I fabricated this new bracket, I just put the spring, I just drilled a hole in it to run the spring up to the throttle linkage, and as you can see, it certainly functions like it should. And that's pretty much the setup on the carburetor. Nice part is, even with the spacer, I can still use the provided Weber air filter, air box, and cleaner that came with the kit. Kind of looks like a little rectangular K&N, but it all fits under the bonnet without any clearance or rubbing issues, so that's pretty nice. Also, on this Weber, it does have the vacuum port right here on the side of the carburetor. That's the one I'm using to plumb into the vacuum advance on the distributor. The line just goes straight across over to the distributor, piece of cake. Something I didn't mention yesterday, some people are probably up in the air trying to figure out what it's set for. Ignition timing, at least on this YJ, on the 2.5, you can see the little yellow down there it actually still has timing marks. I guess that's to help the people on the assembly line, or since this was originally a CJ engine, they just never bothered to get rid of those timing marks. So when you put the new distributor in, you actually have timing marks to go off of. And all the research I've done, I couldn't find an exact number. I was using a 86 CJ7 as a reference for ignition timing. And closest I could find was people were saying anywhere between 9 and 11 degrees before top dead center. So when I set this, I set it to 9, and then once I got the engine started, I adjusted it back and forth a little bit on the distributor, and I'm sitting just about at 10 degrees for optimal engine run and performance. And then, of course, I mentioned the distributor yesterday. Got that all dialed in. I just explained about the timing, degrees, marks, and everything like that. If you're curious about the wiring, essentially, depending on the HEI setup you use, whether it's a DuraSpark or in my case, I used the GM version, I can give you the details on it, but if you just look up the nutter bypass, most of the guys are using it on the straight sixes. You can do the nutter bypass on this as well. It's the same wire setup, same wire colors, etc., etc. It's a little bit different, of course, with this GM HEI. If you guys are interested in this and need to do the setup, let me know, and I can do a quick video on the wiring setup for this as well. And also on this setup, I was able to get the Wrangler's tachometer to work. When you go through your wire loom, or it's a lot easier if you still have the big square ignition coil module, I think is what they call it. The wires that go to it, all you need to do is splice into the green wire, and that'll run your tachometer. And of course, that just goes to the green side on your coil. And the hot side, I just ran a line. You can kind of see it. I still need to put it in the loom, but I just ran it directly to the fuse box under the driver, or in front of the driver's compartment, on the upper left. There's about 6 or 7 open ports on my fuse box, with like single ports, and with a female blade terminal, I just plugged into one of those, made sure it was on the key side, so when I turned the key, it would actually provide power, and I could shut the engine off as well. The other side of it, if you do the DuraSpark, you're going to notice on most of the DuraSpark modules you get, there's going to be a white wire. The white wire actually runs down to the starter solenoid to provide a hot lead while the engine's cranking, since the whole bus or the whole fuse block is without power while the engine's cranking. So you'll have power to start the engine, and then once you get it out of the start mode on the ignition switch, it'll continue on with the red wire. If you have questions about that, please once again ask, and I'll be happy to give you more details about that. I think that's pretty much it. If I missed anything, please don't hesitate to ask me. I'm happy enough to answer questions on this. Right here you get a little bit of better view. Right there where I'm pushing down with my finger, that's the actual aluminum adapter plate that I made out of aluminum myself. Right there where the 1/4-inch bolt is, that's the Weber adapter, the spacer plate, and the carburetor itself. Being that this is a 3236 Weber, I wasn't paying attention when I put in the adapter plate last night. I was probably tired or hopped up from watching The Walking Dead or something, but actually put this plate in backwards. And in my case, since I have two different size bores on my carburetor, the butterflies wouldn't open because they were hitting. So if you do use that spacer, make sure you clock it accordingly. And also, when you put this adapter in, or you put the Weber adapter on the plate, I mentioned yesterday you can't put nuts on the bottom of it. It's got to thread into the plate. So make sure you got the proper hardware stack up. Make sure you got enough washers and that the bolts don't protrude out the bottom of this adapter plate, or you'll have vacuum sealing issues. In which case I had to add an extra washer, and I actually had to dry test fit it before I installed it, and I actually had to grind down the bolts about maybe a 1/16 of an inch, if no, not even that much. It was very minimal, just to make them flush with the bottom of the plate. Anyways, I really hope this video helped. As soon as I'm done here, I'll probably add video of this thing running to let you see how it runs and sounds. I still need to adjust the idle mixture just a little bit. It's almost dead on, but I still get a little rumbling at idle and a little dieseling at shut off. So I still have, it's running a little too rich still. But besides that, it seems to be doing pretty good. Before I had the regulator problem, I was driving it for about a month with this setup. Gas mileage was great at about 17 city, about 20, 21 on the highway, running 30-inch tires. I think that's about it. The only other thing is this is an actual 89 YJ. Looks a little different. It doesn't look like an episode of Miami Vice or anything like that, because I did the TJ grill conversion. If you have any questions on that, I'm happy enough to answer those as well. Anyways, I hope this helped, and I hope I covered everything. Thanks. And one more thing really quick I forgot to mention, and I wanted to make sure to cover it before I posted this. The EGR valve, you can see, is pretty good size on this. So you can either remove the EGR valve and make some sort of cover plate to cover it up if you have a clearance issue. I actually ended up grinding down on my Weber adapter just enough with an angle grinder to clear the EGR valve. Fortunately, the top part here is the cool side, since it has the vacuum diaphragm in there, so I don't have any vapor lock issues or anything like that. But I got like a half completed grind picture of the base adapter that I did, that I'll certainly include with the video post I'll be making. I just wanted to make sure to mention that, so if you try to do this and put your carb on and start hitting the EGR valve and start sending me hate mail because of it, I wanted to give you the warning before you had to deal with that. Anyways, thanks, and I'll get this posted. Still got to adjust the carb just a hair more, but it's working.